with all the baptisms, and just help us to just continually to use the baptistry once again someday, and just give the preacher the words to preach tonight as well. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Remain standing as we're going to go right into our message time this evening. 2 Samuel chapter 17. 2 Samuel chapter 17. We're going to read there 2 Samuel chapter 17. And then if you'll mark it, we're going to flip back over to 2 Samuel chapter number 19 as well. So 2 Samuel chapter 17, and then mark in your Bible, maybe if you use your finger or something like that, we're going to be over at 2 Samuel 19 as well. So 2 Samuel chapter 17, begin reading there in verse number 27. 2 Samuel chapter 17, begin reading there in verse number 27. And it came to pass, when David was come to Mahanaim, that Shobai, the son of Nahash of Reba, of the children of Ammon, and Machir, the son of Amiel, of Lodebar, and Barzillai, the Gileadite of Rogelim, bought beds and basins and earthen vessels, and wheat and barley and flour, and parched corn and beans and lentils, and parched pulse, and honey and butter, and sheep and cheese of kind for David, and for the people that were with him to eat. For they said, the people is hungry and weary and thirsty in the wilderness. Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Lord Jesus, we thank you so much for the day. Thank you so much for this opportunity we have to look into your word tonight. Thank you so much for the opportunity to meet in your house. There's no better place to be than in God's house. And we just pray, Lord, you continue to bless. Lord, bless our missionaries, Lord. We just pray that you'll put your hand upon them, keep them safe this evening. We just pray, Lord, that you'll bless them in their ministries. I pray, Lord, that you'll bless our services on Sunday. And Lord, as we even look forward to our Mother's Day and our special day that we'll have that for that as well. Lord, bless our evening tonight. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. You may be seated. Looking into the story of Barzillai, and some things that we can learn about him. He's mentioned here in the text. And the story where we are is that David now has become under attack really from his own children, trying to take over the kingdom, and Absalom is trying to overthrow and to cause trouble really in verse number 25. And Absalom made Amasa captain of the host instead of Joab, which Amasa was a man's son whose name was Ithra, an Israelite, that went to Abigail, the daughter of Nahash, sister of Zeruiah, Joab's brother. So Israel and Absalom pitched in the land of Gilead, and he's beginning to try to overthrow the kingdom, being tried to take over control. And so David has left Jerusalem for safety, has left to try to recoup and get his people together. And during these travels, during this time, there are men that stood up for David. There are men that helped him. There are men that helped him in his journeys, in his time as fleeing for safety and for keeping himself and his men, his people safe. And so Barzillai of Rogelim is mentioned in connection with Absalom's rebellion against his father, King David. In the same instance in which Ahithophel betrayed the king. And so this was a rough time for David. This was a difficult time for him. It was a difficult time for his country. It was a difficult time for his people. Yet in the midst of all of this, right in the middle of these stories, we find some people that were loyal to the king, that were loyal to service to him, that were loyal to serving the king and putting themselves even on the line themselves for the king, to help him, to put their hand to keep him fed and keep him encouraged and keep him going, and helping him to realize that he's still their king. He was still the one to lead them. He was still the one to take care of them. He was still the one to guide their country and their people. So even though they were in a difficult time, there were still those that were loyal to him. There were still those that were loyal to their country, to their people. And we find that in this man named Barzillai of this country. And David had fled from Jerusalem, but because of Ahithophel's counsel, he had been thwarted, and he and his men were able to get to this place, Mahanaim, in verse number 27, and they were able to escape the attack, escape the onslaught of Absalom, and to be able to get away from him, and to be able to hide in this special place away from the danger between the Sea of Galilee and the Dead Sea. And It's in the area of Gilead, and so 2 Samuel chapter 17, verse number 24 helps us to understand where that is. And David came to Mahanaim, and Absalom passed over Jordan, and he and all the men of Israel with him. And so David and his men arrived here exhausted. They had been fleeing from Absalom. They had been seeking their lives, be able to seek the opportunity to get away. And Absalom and his great army were in hot pursuit. They were trying to overthrow the king. They were trying to take care of David. They were trying to usurp him so that Absalom could take over, so that Absalom could finalize his coup, and his great army were in hot pursuit. It was time that an old Highlander named Barzillai, along with Shobai and Nahash, we read that there in verse number 27, they came to help him. They came to encourage David. They came to lift him up. They came to feed him. They came to give him some rest, maybe even give him some safety, to reinforce him, if we could put that phrase out there. And it was at this time that this man, Barzillai, helped him and came to his rescue. And I want us to notice some things about Barzillai and some things that were important to him, and how he encouraged David, how he encouraged his people, how he encouraged the country, how he encouraged his nation. And this was a man who really put himself on the line, put his people on the line, put his family on the line because of what he did for David. Now, understand that had David been able to be overthrown and been able to maybe even been killed or taken captive, and Absalom had been able to take over the kingdom and take over that, Barzillai would have been a target for Absalom because he helped David, because he put his life on the line for David, because he was an accomplice, if we could put it that way, for David. His life was on the line, but he did it because of some things I would like to look at tonight, briefly tonight, to be able to maybe encourage ourselves in the Lord as well, and some things in Barzillai's life. So I wanted to see, first of all, that Barzillai was loyal. Barzillai was loyal. A lot of times we're loyal to different things. If you have a favorite football team, you're loyal to that football team. There's a lot of bandwagoners where, they're loyal to a certain team so long as they're getting to the playoffs, so long as their team is winning the division. And then, there's those few years where your team is just absolutely terrible. And so your loyalty is kind of relevant based on how good your team is or not. Now, I don't know how well the baseball teams out here do or any of those others, but I remember for a while there, the Cardinals were pretty good. They were pretty good. They got all the way to the Super Bowl, and then they couldn't stop the other team on the Super Bowl, and that was kind of a rough time for them. But then there are times when Cardinals have been one of the worst teams in leagues, but yet there's players and there's folks that were loyal to them all the way and loyal all the time, and then there's times when they're doing really well, and all of a sudden the fans really come out. They start doing really, really well. And there's other people that, again, they're loyal to their country. They will serve their country. They will volunteer to serve their country. We're loyal to our country. I know when Angela and I were in Argentina, and people would always come around to us and ask us things about our countries. And, of course, they get all their news from other places, and they get all their news from outside sources. And so they're always asking us about it. And every time I'd play soccer with the Argentines, I had my USA jersey that I would wear with my USA jersey and all those kind of different things. And sometimes they would tease us about that and tease us about our America's quality in soccer. And I tell them, hey, we're America. We don't really play soccer. We play football. And if you'll notice, all of our American soccer teams are really not really Americans. They're other groups of people playing on American teams. That's just the way it is, right? So that's not our name, that's not our main loyalty, but we're all loyal to different things. We are loyal to our spouse, we're loyalty to our family. We have loyalties to different things, but Barzillai here was loyal to his king. He was loyal to his country. He was loyal to his people. And it was a chieftain like Barzillai who controlled an area, who controlled a vast number of people. We can see by all that he provided for David here, and to give David some rest, to give him some sustenance, to encourage him, to give him a little bit of reinforcement, as we have said before. He was a man of wealth. He was a man of ability, which would have made him a target to someone like Absalom, especially later on if Absalom had been able to take over the kingdom, to take it over, he would have been a target. He would have been someone who Absalom definitely would have gone after because he expressed his loyalty to David, but even that because he was a man of wealth, he was a man of means. But Barzillai used that as a loyalty to David. He was going to be loyalty to his people. He was going to be loyal to his kingdom. And yet in the day of rebellion and treachery, where many watched to see which way the wind would blow, Barzillai showed loyalty to the king. It's interesting how many times we're loyal to something depending on how well it could turn out. Have you ever been that way before? Sometimes we're loyal to our brother or sister, and we'll stand up for them until all of a sudden we realize the person that they're fighting against is this big giant guy. Ever been there before? It's always good to have that friend that's a giant. And then we'd always make sure everybody knew that. That's my friend. And we're always loyal to that individual. Why? Because they were going to protect us. They were going to keep us safe. They were going to help us with that. But really, Barzillai was loyal no matter who was around him, no matter who was taking care of him, no matter the situation. He was going to be loyal to his king. And I want us to notice the things about that loyalty that Barzillai expressed and that loyalty that Barzillai had given to King David and to his people, and especially to his men, as we find here in verses 27 through 29 of 2 Samuel chapter 17. And all that he did here in verse number 28, how he brought beds and basins and earthen vessels and all of the food and everything that they took. And remember, David had fled the city, had fled Jerusalem kind of in a haste and a hurry to be able to save his people, to be able to keep himself alive, to save the people. And so they had left in a hurry, so they didn't have time to grab a lot of things. And so here is Barzillai. He brought everything. He brought everything that David was going to need at his own personal cost, at his own personal sacrifice. He brought all of those things. And I want you to first of all see about his loyalty here, that it was a wholehearted loyalty. It was something that he didn't just do a little bit. We didn't read in verse number 27 through 29 how he just brought a few things. He didn't rifle through his pantry and say, let's see, what do we got here? Let's see, what's all the expired stuff that we have, or the things that are about to expire. I remember when we first moved into our house in Louisville, Texas. We bought our first house. We're first-time buyers, and we were excited about it. And of course, when you move into a new neighborhood, all the neighbors come out, and they usually are trying to be friendly to you and be nice to you and different things. Well, I believe it was our neighbor kind of catty corner to us. We were on a corner. Our house was on the corner of the street here, and came here, and our house was right on the corner. And so across the street, our neighbor came and introduced themselves to us and handed us this bottle of salsa, this jar of salsa. And, hey, here you go. We want to say welcome to our community. We're glad that you're here, and take this gift. And so we took the gift, and we said thank you, introduced ourselves to them, and just talked a little bit and chatted. And I came back inside and handed the jar to Angela, and she looked at it, and it was 2 years expired. They had gone through their pantry and said, well, we got some new neighbors. Let's see here. What do we got? Let's see. There's an old jar that we went to get rid of forever and ever and ever. Let's give them that. And so they gave us an expired jar of salsa that we just kind of went ahead and put it into the solid waste disposal unit, our trash can. We were not going to eat that. And, of course, we didn't say anything to anybody. We didn't go back out and knock on the door and say, oh, by the way, here you go. You can have this back. We didn't do anything like that. But that was not what Barzillai did. His loyalty was not as something that he's going to do maybe out of being forced to do so. No, he was loyal to his king, and it was wholehearted loyalty. He gave of his best. He gave of abundance here as well. And it was anything less would have seen Barzillai not so generous. This was no token of nicety. He didn't just kind of say, let's go see how King David's doing. Let's see how his men's are doing. And let's just see, we have a couple loaves of bread here, and let's just do that. No. It was as best that he possibly could do, and he brought as much as he possibly could do. You remember the little boy who came to Jesus Christ, and he brought his 5 loaves and 2 fishes. It didn't seem like it was much, but even for that little boy, it was everything that he had. He brought everything to Jesus Christ. He had his wholehearted loyalty. As I wrote in my notes here, churches need more wholehearted people to be loyal to the ministry of God, to be loyal to their church, to be loyal to serving the Lord. We have plenty of people that are have their token loyalties. They'll come for maybe a service or two, or they'll come to 1 or 2 things, but really the service to the Lord needs wholehearted loyalty. It's like a missionary that goes to the foreign field,
he can't just be token missionaries. They go and they give their lives, they give their families, they move, they go to a foreign country, they learn a language, they learn a culture, which, trust me, when you've lived in a culture outside the United States of America, it's a totally different thing, and they learn that. They're wholehearted. We never want a missionary that just kind of goes ho-hum. No, we want them to go and plant a ministry, to plant a church, to do those kind of things, and God needs more people like Barzillai who have wholehearted loyalty. I'm going to go. I'm going to be faithful no matter what. I'm going to give everything that I have to it. We joined sports, and if you were ever in high school and you had a high school team, or you were in a high school sport, or maybe you were in band and all those different things, and usually it used to be back when I was a kid, it used to be you were either in sports, or because you couldn't be in sports, you were in band. Anybody remember that? You couldn't play sports, so here, take an instrument and be in band or something like that, or whatever it was. But some people actually liked and enjoyed being in band. They enjoyed playing an instrument, or they enjoyed doing those things. And I remember when I was a teenager, we had this couple kids in our class that really enjoyed the debate class. They were in their debate classes in their school, and they were quite good at it, and they practiced those different things, and they were good at those things. And it takes loyalty to that. It takes hard work to do that. If you want to be the starter on a team, you're never going to be a starter on a team if you're not wholeheartedly loyal to it. If you're going to every practice, you're putting everything you have into it, that you're working out. And here at my job, I work at a gym, and I teach a fitness class, and people pay money to come to that fitness class, and people will tell me, I just sometimes folks will tell me, I just don't feel like I'm getting the results that I think I should have, and I'm as nice as I possibly can, and I don't, I'm trying to sell a product, so I don't tell them, but there's a lot of people that come in and just the truth is they're lazy. You're paying your membership fees to come here to try to lose weight and to try to be healthy or to try to be fit, whatever your goals are, it doesn't make any difference. But if you're going to come pay money to come to a class, it's not going to work unless you put wholeheartedly into it. If you're over there and I'm asking you to do jumping jacks and you're just kind of like, it's never going to work. You have to put yourself into it. If you want to get into shape or if you want to do those things, it has to be a wholehearted thing. It can't be something that you just kind of sort of do. And there's a lot of Christians, and they're living their lives, and they're like Barzillai here, opposite of Barzillai, meaning that it's Christianity, yes, but it's not wholehearted Christianity. This man has put their heart into what they truly, each person puts their heart into what they truly care about it, but loyalty to God should be above all else. Here was a man, Barzillai, who was loyalty to David above all else. He was loyal to his people above all else, and he was going to sacrifice anything he could to encourage David, to keep David going, to lift him up, to feed him, to take care of him, to give him rest, to reinforce him, because his loyalty was to David. But what we need for God's people and what Christianity needs today, churches today need more of God's people to be 100% loyal to it, 100% loyal to the things of God, 100% loyalty to the service to the Lord, rather than partial loyalty, rather than relative loyalty. We can see it was a wholehearted loyalty, but it's also an uncalculated loyalty. Remember here, Absalom is trying to overthrow, and Absalom is trying to take over David. It's verse number 1 of chapter 17 there. Moreover, Ahithophel said unto Absalom, let me now choose out 12,000 men, and I will rise and pursue after David this night. And so there is an attempt to take David. There's an attempt to overthrow his kingdom. There is this attempt to create this coup within the kingdom. And Barzillai could have suffered had Absalom prevailed. And he knew that. I believe that Barzillai understood the danger. Barzillai understood the cost of his loyalty. Barzillai understood the risks that he was taking, but yet it didn't matter anyway. This did not even come into his mind. Here he comes and he puts everything together. There might have even been servants of this man Barzillai. There might have been even friends of Barzillai. You understand now, Absalom, he could take over, and if he takes over, you're done. He's going to make sure that you pay. He's going to make sure that you have an extra cost. He may tax you. He may even kill you if you express this loyalty to David. But Absalom didn't care. He didn't mind. My loyalty is to David. My loyalty is to my kingdom. My loyalty is to my people. And my loyalty is to those who God has placed in control and God has placed over this kingdom. And it was an uncalculated loyalty. It was something that he didn't do with pause. I don't believe that he took the time to consider the consequences. No, he just helped Barzillai. He just helped David. He moved to go with him, and he even had friends, Nahash and Shobai. He didn't do it on his own. He found friends. He found those that could also step up and help him as well. It didn't matter the danger. It didn't matter the cost. No matter what the cost would be, loyalty was first and before all else. It's interesting how many folks will demand or expect that the pastor be 100% loyal, and he should be. But should not God's people as well be 100% loyal? Should not God's people as well be 100% loyal to the service to the Lord, to 100% loyalty to the ministry, to the place where God has put them in, to the church where God has given them, to the family that God has given them? 100% loyalty, no matter what the cost, and uncalculated loyalty. I'm loyal to my wife. 100% loyal to my wife. If you're going to do anything to her, just let you know I have lots of ammo, and I'll empty it all before you hurt her or do anything to her. Uncalculated. Some folks would say I open carry sometimes, and people say, well, there's different philosophies about open or concealed carry. And I'll just say I'd rather take the bullet first before she did. I'm loyal to her. I'll take the cost. I'll take the hit so she has an opportunity to be safe and an opportunity to get away. Of course, now from what I know about Miss Rucker, we just need to hide behind her because she has the bag of survival from what I hear. Everything's there. Everything's we need. Loyal. Unconditional, uncalculated loyalty. But also we have a genuine loyalty. Barzillai later accompanied David to Jordan, and I would like us to flip back over to that, 2 Samuel chapter 19. 2 Samuel chapter 19. We find again as David is back in the capital, he's getting back in, he retains control, he retains power, and he's able to go back into Jerusalem as he gets back to his country. And verse number 31 there, and Barzillai the Gileadite came down from Rogelim and went over Jordan with the king to conduct him over Jordan. Now Barzillai was a very aged man, even 80 years old, and he had provided the king's sustenance while he lay at Mahanaim, for he was a very great man. The king said unto Barzillai, Come thou over with me, and I will feed thee with me in Jerusalem. And Barzillai said unto the king, How long have I to live, and that I should go up with the king unto Jerusalem? It was a genuine loyalty. Barzillai later accompanied David to Jordan, and he was going to even continue to go with him. It wasn't one of those things where, you know what I can do, and I can, if I take care of the King David now, then maybe later, once he gets back to the throne, once he gets back into Jerusalem, he'll remember me. He'll return the favor. I've had people that would tell me, I used to invite people over to my house, but I quit doing that because they wouldn't invite me to their house. And I used to do nice things for people, but I quit doing that because they weren't nice back to me. And I used to do things for others, and that's not the right kind of loyalty. We don't do to receive. We do because we love people. We do for folks because we desire to see someone else blessed. We're loyal to church, not for what church can do for us, but what we can serve the Lord as. There are many times we have folks come and they'll visit the church, and that's one of the things I ask. What can your church do for my teenagers? What can your church do for my family? What can my church do for this? And how can you provide me with that? And how can you provide me with this and that? That's not the genuine loyalty. We come to church and we serve the Lord because we love God, because we love Him, irregardless of what we might receive. And we know that if we have genuine loyalty, God will bless us. But even as the former president once said, seek not what the country can do for us, but what can we do for our country? Genuine loyalty. His loyalty had his loyalty been superficial, he would have been only too glad to bid his guests farewell from his door. He'd have just came on by and dropped it off and just kept on going. Maybe he could have seen David and just kind of dropped off and said, here's some bread, be ye well filled, and just keep on going. No. His loyalty was genuine. Even at this time, at his age, at his advanced age, he was still willing to help and to escort David across the river here to get him back to Jerusalem and to do these kind of things for him. You know, loyalty without needing reward is loyalty without having to be begged, and loyalty for love is the best kind of loyalty of all. I love it. One commentator threw some questions in. He says, how is our loyalty to King Jesus? I mean, do we give our all to him, or is it just relative? Do we serve the Lord in so much that if I give to him, he'll give back to me? Or do we serve him because we just simply love him? I mean, do we scheme and ask what's in it for me, or do we go all the way? Or are we always 100% sold out to it? You think about Philippians chapter 3 and verse number 8, God says, yea, doubtless I count all things but loss for the excellency of the knowledge of Jesus Christ my Lord, for whom I have suffered the loss of all things, and do count them but dung, that I may win Christ. Even Paul was loyalty to Christ, even if it cost him everything, even if he didn't receive anything in reward on this earth. I'm going to serve my Lord, I'm going to serve my Savior, simply because he gave me everlasting life, and I don't need anything else other than that. I don't need anything else. My loyalty is genuine. I'm loyal to him irregardless of what I might receive monetarily, irregardless of any fame that I may receive, irregardless of anything extra that I may give. Here was Barzillai, and Barzillai said there in verse number 35 of chapter 19, am I this day 80 years old? And can I discern between good and evil? Can thy servant taste what I eat or what I drink? Can I hear any more the voice of singing men and singing women? Wherefore then should I be servant? Wherefore then should thy servant be yet a burden unto my Lord the King? He said, I don't need anything else. I don't need anything better from you. I don't need you to take care of me in your kingdom. I don't need you to feed me in all those places. At his advanced age, he said, I mean, right now, it's kind of, I'm just living. I'm just going to go home and close out the rest of my years with my people, and I don't need anything else. I don't need any more. David, I wasn't loyal to you to get a blessing. I wasn't loyal to you just so that when you're back in the kingdom, you give me an extra position. I wasn't loyal so that you made me the song leader. I wasn't loyal so that you made me a Sunday school teacher. I wasn't loyal so that you made me one of these, or I wasn't loyal so that you would make me be the special music person. I wasn't loyal so that I would get anything extra. I just did it because I loved you. And I wanted you to be blessed. I didn't do any of those things. And in fact, here we can see that Barzillai was loyal even to personal sacrifice. I mean, he was willing to do without. And he was willing to do without. He was willing to sacrifice everything. He didn't ask anything in return. As we read that chapter 17, of all that he gave King David, that was quite expensive. He gave him beds. He gave him food. He gave him all the things that he needed. He gave him refreshment. He gave all of that and asked nothing in return. He was loyal, and his loyalty was genuine. But also, I want to notice a couple more things. Barzillai was liberal. He was liberal. Not as in the liberal we think of today, which is just basically crazy, or the new word, progressive. It's liberal and progressive. It's none of those things. He was liberal by its original definition. Barzillai is a byword for liberality and hospitality. He was enriched. We saw that in 2 Samuel chapter 19, verse 32 there. We can see that. Now Barzillai was very old, even 80 years old, and had provided the king's sustenance while he lay at Mahanaim, for he was a very great man. So we know that he had great wealth, and we know that he had servants. We know that he had great materials. He had great finances. He had all of those things, but none of that mattered to him. His liberality was liberal. His liberality was available because of who he was, because of his response to needs, because of his generosity, because of his willingness to give. He was a man who was liberal. He was a man who was blessed because in every time there was a need, he responded to it. It's a Christian grace to respond to needs as we've been looking through the book of Acts. And the church of Jerusalem, what were they doing? They were greatly blessed. Why? Because every time there was a need, they were selling possessions. They were doing everything they could to meet those needs, to help with those needs. The church of Jerusalem was loyal to one another. They were loyalty to at a cost to themselves. They were liberal. They were a family, a church family that helped one another even to great cost to themselves, but without demanding anything in return. Barzillai was loyal, but he was also liberal. He gave. We look back to all that he gave to King David there in verse number 17. It was not just a few things. It was beds and basins and earthen vessels and wheat and barley and flour and parched corn and beans and lentil, parched pulse and honey and butter and sheep and cheese of kine for David, for the people that were with him to eat. For they said the people is hungry and weary and thirsty in the wilderness. And just by the context, and we can see the sacrifice that he gave them more than enough to be able to eat and be full and have plenty and have extra. He didn't give just enough, or he didn't give just enough to get him by. He didn't give him just enough to maybe empty out the pantry so he could fill up again. No. He gave extra. He gave in abundance. He gave more than was necessary. He gave more than required. But you see, when we're loyal to something, and it takes our heart and soul, it gives us our focus, and we give to that thing. The more that we place something in importance in our lives, the more that we give to it. He was liberal in his response to a need, but he was also generous to it. He had learned the secret to giving, and you'll look over to Proverbs chapter 11. Proverbs chapter 11, and we're looking at verse number 24. Proverbs chapter 11, verse number 24. Now God says, there is that scattereth, and yet increases. And there is that withholdeth more than is meet, but it tendeth to poverty. The liberal soul shall be made fat, and he that watereth shall be watered also himself. He that withholdeth corn, the people shall curse him, but blessing shall be upon the head of him that selleth it. Here Barzillai had understood that loyalty and generosity and liberality with loyalty brings even greater blessings. I tried to help Ashley, and she learned this quite well, that the more that she gave, the more God blessed her. The more she gave, God blessed her. And I remember when she got her first job, and I began to encourage Ashley. I said, what you need to do is, now that you have a job and you're going to have income, you need to ask God, how much do you want you to give to Him? I said, more than your tithe. How much do you want God to give to you? How much do you want God to bless you? How much do you want God to do it? And even as she was 16 years old with a job, I think she gave as much as Angela and I to Faith Promise Missions, and Lord just blessed her beyond measure. Her loyalty was to church. Her loyalty was to God, and it helped and changed her life, and she learned that quite well. A church that's going to be greatly blessed is a church that's loyal to the things that God's called them to do. The more a church does for missions and the more the church does for others, the more God blesses that church. The more that a family does for loyalty to God, the more God blesses that family. Here was Barzillai, and he was greatly blessed. He was blessed beyond measure, and God had taken great care of him, and God had provided for his family. And even at the great age of 80 years old, he was still a greatly blessed man. He was still a great man. God had blessed him beyond measure for what he had done for David and for his loyalty to David and his liberality toward David. And God had put his hand of blessing upon him mightily. This quality is not only seen in our giving to others, but especially in our giving to the Lord. And our giving to the Lord should be an attitude of grace and abundance of liberality, an attitude of willingness. I mean, there's more to giving finances to the Lord. There's giving our time. There's giving our talents. There's giving our families. There's giving of our homes. There's giving of our very lives. There's more to just giving in our finances, even though that is definitely a part of our service and loyalty to God. But a family that surrenders its life and takes a family to a foreign country, that's a great sacrifice for the Lord, and God will bless that mightily. There's an addiction to the ministry. Here was a man that was loyal to his king. And Christians are to be hospitable, the Bible says, and it's even a requirement of pastors, as we've been studying in our Sunday school. hour. But thirdly, I want us to see about this loyalty to Barzillai. It made him content. It made him content. Look what it says there in verse number 36 of chapter 19. Verse number 36. Thy servant will go a little way over Jordan with the king, and why should the king recompense me with such a reward? Let thy servant, I pray thee, turn back again, that I may die in mine own city, and be buried by the grave of my father and my mother. But behold, thy servant Chimham, let him go over with the Lord the king, and do to him what shall seem good unto thee. Here was Barzillai, and he was willing to sacrifice and give up any kind of reward to someone else. He was content with what he had. He was content with the blessings that God had given to him. He was content with what God had provided for him, and we know that God had provided for him much. God had provided for him great, but he was content to let someone else have the recognition. He was content to let someone else have all of the promotion. He was content to have someone else have all of the extra training and have all of the extra position. And the king's answer in verse number 38, Chimham shall go over with me, and I will do to him which shall seem good unto thee, and whatsoever thou shalt require of me, that I will do for thee. And so he was Chimham. He was just a man that was probably part of Barzillai's family, that was well known to Barzillai, maybe one of his servants or one of those that was within his group, within his family group, and he was content just to let someone else have all the recognition. He was content to let someone else have the training, let someone else have the blessings, let someone else have everything that God was going to give to him or that David was going to provide with him. Loyalty to the king in such a manner that it doesn't matter. I don't need much more. Let God take care of me. Let God bless me. David sought to reward Barzillai with a position in the court in Jerusalem. We saw that there in 2 Samuel chapter 19 as we just read there. However, Barzillai politely refused this honor and instead gave it to someone else, desiring to spend his remaining days in his home and with his family. And he didn't wish to burden the king, even though it really wasn't a burden to the king, but he would rather let someone else take that position. He would rather just let someone else have the recognition. He was honored later in 2 Kings chapter 2, 1 Kings chapter 2, verse 7. He was later honored by David and Solomon. He showed a concern for other people and his other things. Look what it says there in verse number 35. It didn't make any difference to him. At the end of verse number 35, wherefore then should thy servant be yet a burden unto my Lord the king? Things didn't matter to him. He already had lots of things. God had already provided for him. He understood that everything that he had was temporal things anyway. He understood that more things and more recognition and more power and more prestige and more possessions, more land, more recognition within a city, more of anything else wasn't going to make him any more blessed. It wasn't going to make him any more happy. The more things that people have, the less happy they are, really, in a sense. The more people have, the more storage units they have, and then they just get frustrated because now I'm paying for all these storage units. And so I have all this stuff, but they don't want to get rid of all their stuff, so now they have storage units after storage units after storage units. One of the fastest growing businesses in America right now is storage unit businesses. And they're popping up everywhere because people have to have lots and lots of things. And even Christians are stuck with this idea that if I have more things, if I skip out on church and work a little extra, I can have a little more money to have more things and I'll be more happy. But the more things we have, the less happy we are many times. The less happy we are. You see, Barzillai epitomizes the qualities which brings joy and contentment to the Christian life. And that is loyalty. And loyalty that brings liberality. Barzillai lived his life for others. And the Christian is called upon to make his material possessions immaterial. The question tonight is, who's your loyalty? Where is your loyalty? To whom is your loyalty? To what place is your loyalty? To what do you express your loyalty to? To where do you give your time? Is your loyalty relevant based on the situation? Is your loyalty based on the reward? Or is loyalty based on, I love God, and that's all that matters, and that's all we need? We have every head bowed and every eye closed tonight. We have an opportunity to express our loyalty to the Lord. Loyalty to God and loyalty to His church should come before anything and everything. No matter what the cost is, loyalty is all that matters. Loyalty. Do we serve the Lord based upon what the Lord's going to give us and provide for us, or do we serve the Lord because we love Him? Because we desire the most because we desire just to please God. Barzillai wasn't loyal so that he could get something from David. He didn't bring all the food and possessions thinking that, man, I do all this for him. He's going to give me a position. He's going to give me more. He's going to promote me. He's going to do all these different things. No, he was loyal because he loved his king and he loved his nation. And that was it. He didn't give to double. It wasn't an investment with a high rate of return. No, he was going to give whether he got anything back, irregardless. He was loyal. He was loyal. He wanted to serve the Lord loyally. As we stand to our feet tonight, we have a quick time of invitation and spend some time. Is our loyalty relative?